We saw a figure standing in the fog, but it dissolved when we blinked. At first, none of us said anything. The trail had narrowed to a ribbon of damp earth threading through hemlock and cedar, the canopy thick enough that even the afternoon light came through gray and diluted. Fog had been drifting between the trunks since we entered the lower valley, a thin veil hugging the ground, breathing slowly in and out between roots and rocks. The figure stood about 30 yards ahead, perfectly still. It was the shape of a person, tall, narrow shoulders, head slightly bowed. The fog curled around it like smoke around a statue. Then Jake blinked. "Did you?" The figure unraveled. Not vanished, not stepped away. It came apart, like a reflection disturbed in water. The outline stretched, broke into strands of pale mist, and folded back into the fog. The space where it had stood was empty. Jake rubbed his eyes. "Okay. That was there." "Yeah," I said quietly. Mara nodded without looking at us. The fog shifted again, soft and slow, as if breathing through unseen lungs. For a moment we just stood on the trail listening. The woods were wrong. Took me a second to understand why. There were no birds. Not the occasional chirp or distant wing beat. Nothing. Even the wind seemed hesitant, sliding through the trees in shallow, uneven sighs. "You think someone's out here?" Jake asked. "Standing in fog and then evaporating?" Mara said. Jake shrugged. None of us laughed. We kept walking. The fog thickened the deeper we went. At first it stayed low to the ground, but soon it climbed, winding between tree trunks like pale fingers. Branches disappeared into it halfway up, leaving the canopy floating somewhere unseen above us. Our footsteps sounded strange, too soft. Each step landed with a dull, muffled thud, like the earth was swallowing the sound. After a while Jake said, "Does it feel farther?" "What?" Mara asked. "The trail marker." We all looked ahead. A wooden post stood about 50 feet away, painted with a faded red triangle. It had been there when we first saw the figure, though it looked closer then. Now it seemed distant. We walked toward it. The fog thickened between us and the post, flowing sideways in slow currents. 30 feet, 20, 10. But somehow it never felt closer. "Okay," Jake muttered. "That's weird." We kept walking and walking. Finally Mara reached out and touched the post. She turned back toward us, her face pale. That took way too long. Behind us, the trail had vanished. Fog pooled thickly where the path should have been. We checked our phones. No signal. The map app spun uselessly. Jake turned in a slow circle. "Which way did we come from?" None of us answered. The woods looked identical in every direction. Same dense trunks. Same gray fog sliding between them. Then we heard it. A step. Soft. Behind us. We spun around. Nothing. Just fog drifting through the trees. Jake frowned. "You heard that?" "Yeah." Another step. To the left. We turned again. Still nothing. But the fog there shifted strangely, curling inward, folding like fabric being gathered. For a moment it formed a narrow column, the height of a person. Then it loosened again, dissolving back into drifting mist. "Nope," Jake whispered. "I hate that." We started moving faster. The woods began to distort. At least that was the only way to describe it. Trees seemed farther apart than they should have been, the spaces between them stretching in slow, quiet increments. Branches creaked somewhere overhead, but the sound arrived late, echoing a half-second behind the movement. Jake snapped a twig under his boot. The crack echoed. Once, twice, then again, softer, somewhere deeper in the fog, like the forest had repeated it. Mara stopped walking. "Did you hear that?" The echo came again. A fourth time, further away. The same twig snap, repeating into the distance. Jake swallowed. "Okay. That's not normal." The fog thickened suddenly, rolling through the trees in a low wave. And in it, movement, a silhouette, standing, the same height, the same bowed head, the same shape we'd seen earlier, about 40 feet away. This time none of us blinked. We stared. The figure didn't move. Fog streamed around its legs like water around a rock. "Hello," Jake called. The word sounded wrong, flattened, as if the air itself had softened it. The figure lifted its head. Or at least the fog shifted where a head would be. A ripple passed through the mist, and the silhouette stretched, not forward, backward, lengthening impossibly, like a shadow cast from the wrong direction. Mara gasped. The fog peeled away from the figure's shoulders, not dissolving, unwinding, like threads pulled from cloth. The silhouette unraveled again, but this time the strands didn't vanish. They slid outward, through the fog, across the forest floor, between the trees. The woods inhaled. Every branch shivered. The fog thickened around us instantly. "Run," Mara whispered. We ran. The ground sloped unevenly beneath our boots, roots catching at our feet. But the forest wouldn't stay still. Distances stretched. We ran past the same fallen log 3 times. Each time it appeared from a different direction. Jake stopped abruptly. "Listen." The fog swallowed the sound of our breathing. Then, footsteps. Dozens of them. Soft. Approaching. But not from one direction. From everywhere. Like invisible people walking through the trees. Mara grabbed my arm. "Look." Shapes were forming in the fog. Tall. Thin. Standing between the trunks. Not solid figures. Just places where the mist bent inward, sculpted into vague human outlines. 1, then 2, then 6, then more. Watching. None of them moved, but the fog around their legs drifted forward slowly, closing the distance. Jake whispered, That's not real." A branch snapped behind us. We turned. Another figure stood there, closer, this one clearer than the others, and its outline was wrong. The shoulders were slightly too wide, the head slightly too long, like the forest had tried to copy a person and gotten the proportions wrong. The fog rippled through its chest. For a second I thought I saw bark beneath it. Tree bark. Then the shape dissolved again. But the others didn't. They remained, silent, watching. "Why do they look like us?" Mara whispered. I hadn't noticed until she said it. But she was right. One silhouette had Jake's slouch. Another stood with Mara's narrow stance. And one stood exactly like me. Head tilted slightly, arms loose at the sides. It raised its arm. I hadn't moved. The fog arm bent anyway, pointing past us, toward the trail marker. The wooden post stood behind us again. The same red triangle. Impossible. We had run for minutes. Jake stared at it. That wasn't there. The fog shifted. And suddenly the post wasn't 50 feet away. It was 10, then 5. Like distance itself had folded. Mara stepped toward it slowly. Something moved beneath the fog at the base of the post. Roots, dozens of them. Thick, twisting. They spread outward across the ground like veins. And the fog clung to them, shaping itself along their lengths, like muscles around bones. Jake whispered, Those shapes." The silhouettes in the forest leaned slightly forward, as if listening. Mara crouched beside the post. She brushed away the moss. Something was carved into the wood. A date, barely visible. Below it, a message. The letters were uneven, hacked with a knife. We saw it first in the fog. "Don't follow the figures. They are how the forest walks." A breeze moved through the trees. The silhouettes shifted. One stepped forward. Just a single pace. His foot didn't touch the ground. The fog beneath it lifted slightly, like something rising under fabric. Mara stood slowly. "They're not copies." Jake looked at the forest. The silhouettes. The roots. The fog flowing through them all. "What are they then?" Mara's voice was barely audible. "Paths." The word settled heavily in the air. Then the echo came. "Paths, paths, paths," whispered deeper and deeper into the woods. The silhouettes moved again. Not walking, sliding, drawing closer. And the fog thickened between us and the trees, except where the figures stood. There the mist pulled tight, stretched thin, like skin over something ancient beneath it. The forest wasn't copying us. It was learning our shape, so it could move. And when Jake blinked, the figure closest to him didn't dissolve. It stepped into the space where he had been standing. The forest lights flickered like someone was turning the moon on and off. At first it looked like clouds, thin strips of darkness sliding across the sky, dimming the clearing, then passing so the moon spilled back through the branches again. The light came and went in pale pulses, bleaching the trunks of the trees and then swallowing them back into shadow. But the sky above us was perfectly clear. No clouds, no wind strong enough to move anything that high. Yet the moonlight kept blinking. On, off, on, off. Do you see that? Eli asked. We were halfway down the old logging trail, miles from the nearest road. The forest here was dense and old, towering spruce and fir stitched together so tightly that even full moonlight only slipped through in fractured beams. Except now the beams were cutting in and out like faulty electricity. I nodded slowly. Maybe the branches are shifting. Eli looked up. The canopy was still, completely still. The moon vanished again. Darkness collapsed around us like a curtain. Then it came back. The trees jumped into existence. White trunks, tangled roots, the narrow path stretching forward like a scar through the forest. Off, on, off. The rhythm wasn't random. It was too steady, almost deliberate. Eli laughed nervously. Okay, that's weird. His voice sounded strange in the darkness between flashes, flattened somehow, as if the air itself was swallowing the sound. The moonlight blinked again, and for the briefest second, I thought the trees had moved. We kept walking. Neither of us wanted to admit it, but the trail suddenly felt different. The woods had grown quieter, the usual nighttime sounds fading into something hollow and distant. No owls, no insects, just our boots brushing over damp leaves. The moon flickered again. In the flash of light, I noticed something strange along the ground. Our shadows. They stretched across the trail in long, sharp lines. Except they weren't pointing away from the moon. They pointed sideways, as if another light source was hidden somewhere deeper in the forest. Eli, I said, but the light blinked out before he could see. Darkness swallowed everything. For a moment there was nothing but the smell of pine sap and wet earth. Then the moon returned. Our shadows snapped back into place. Eli frowned. What? Nothing, I said, but I kept watching the ground. The flicker came again, and this time the shadows moved. Not much, just a slow, sliding shift across the leaves, like they were adjusting themselves after being caught. A mile later the trail should have crossed the old creek bed, but the creek wasn't there. We stopped at the edge of a shallow depression where the water should have been. Dry stones glistened under the moonlight. Off, on, off. Each flash revealed the same empty channel. Eli checked his phone. No signal, he muttered. But this should be the right place. The moon flickered again. In the flash of light, I saw movement along the far bank. A shape standing between two trees. Tall, thin. Its outline was wrong, too narrow in the shoulders, too long in the arms. Someone's over there, I said quietly. Eli turned, but the light vanished before he could see. When it returned, the shape was gone. Where? There was this time there were two shapes, standing farther back in the trees. They didn't look like people exactly, more like gaps in the moonlight, places where the brightness bent around something unseen. Eli stared at them. You see those? Yeah. The moon blinked. Darkness swallowed them. When the light returned, they were closer. Neither of us had seen them move. We crossed the creek bed quickly. The stones under our boots clicked and scraped, the sound echoing strangely through the trees. But the echoes came back wrong. Delayed. First the normal clatter, then a second, softer version of the same noise from somewhere deeper in the woods. Then a third, fainter, like the forest was repeating our footsteps. The moon flickered again. The shapes were now scattered through the trees around us. 5 of them, maybe 6, each one tall and vaguely human. But none of them cast shadows. The light bent around them instead, like water flowing around stones in a river. Eli whispered, "They're not people." "No." The moon blinked out. In the darkness we heard something shift in the leaves. A slow, dragging movement circling us. When the light returned, the shapes had changed positions. One stood directly on the trail behind us. Another leaned between 2 trees to the left. Their outlines were still wrong, limbs too long, torsos slightly twisted. But something else had changed. They were facing us now. We started walking faster. The trail ahead curved downhill into thicker forest. Branches tangled overhead, leaving only narrow slits where moonlight could reach the ground. But the flickering continued. On, off, on, off. Each flash revealed the figures a little closer. Never moving, never stepping, just appearing slightly nearer each time the moon returned. Eli's breathing grew uneven. "This feels like we're being watched." The words seemed to settle into the woods. "Watched, watched." The echo repeated it softly from somewhere far away. The moon blinked, and for the first time the light didn't return right away. The darkness stretched longer than before. 5 seconds. 10. I could hear Eli shifting beside me. "Why isn't it?" The moon snapped back on, and the forest had changed. The trees were closer together, the trail narrower, and the figures were standing directly beside the path. Not blocking it, just watching. Their shapes were clearer now. They weren't solid. They were made of light, or rather, the absence of it. Each one was a hollow carved out of the moonlight itself. Eli whispered, "They're using the light." I nodded slowly. Camouflage, or something worse. The moon flickered again. And this time, when the darkness came, I saw something moving across the sky. Not clouds. Something vast sliding between us and the moon. When the light returned, the figures were gone. But the shadows weren't right anymore. They stretched outward from every tree, converging toward a single point deeper in the woods, like spokes leading to the center of a wheel. Eli followed them with his eyes. "They want us to go that way." The trail bent exactly in that direction. Neither of us spoke, but we walked. The flickering continued overhead, steady and deliberate. And each time the light blinked out, the forest seemed to rearrange itself slightly. Trees shifting, distances folding in quiet, impossible ways. Minutes stretched strangely, or maybe hours. Time felt slippery here. Eventually the trail ended in a clearing. The moon blinked on, and we saw it. At the center of the clearing stood a massive stump, blackened with age. Its surface was carved with hundreds of thin grooves spiraling outward like rings in wood. Except the rings were too perfect, too deliberate. Symbols. Eli stepped closer. "They're not carvings," he said. "They're channels." The moon blinked. Darkness, then light again. The grooves filled with silver, moonlight pooling inside them, spreading outward through the carved pattern. I looked up. The moon flickered again. But this time I understood what we were seeing. Something enormous was passing across its face. Not once, again and again, like a lid opening and closing. The flickering wasn't the moon turning off. It was something blinking. Eli's voice trembled. The forest, it's signaling. The shadows around the clearing shifted, and the figures returned. Dozens of them now, standing between the trees, their hollow shapes aligned perfectly with the channels carved into the stump. Receivers, or messengers. The moon blinked again, and the light pouring into the carvings pulsed outward through the ground, through the roots, through the trees, through the forest itself. A signal spreading into something ancient beneath the soil. Eli whispered, "It's waking up." The figures turned toward us. Their hollow bodies brightened with the reflected moonlight, and for the first time we saw what was inside them. Not emptiness, movement, roots twisting together, branches bending like bones. The forest had been watching us, testing us, guiding us to the clearing. The moon blinked again, and this time the figures stepped forward, not out of the light, but through it, like the forest itself had learned how to walk.